everyone. I'm Mike Cannici, and welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. I am very excited today. We have a former three-sports star who played for Derby from 1978 to 1982, and then went on to play at Central as well. A great athletic career, the one and only Greg Shpak. And Greg, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Really nice to be here.
So, Greg, let me ask you. I believe you grew up in Oxford, Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken. You didn't grow up in Derby, correct?
No, I actually grew up in Ansonia until I was 11 years old.
Okay.
And then when I was 11 years old, we moved to Oxford. Yep.
Right. So let me ask you. I know your father. He was a very good baseball player for Derby. He went to Derby High. Did he ever talk to you about it when you were a kid, about maybe going to Derby High when you got older, or wasn't really discussed?
You know, Mike, it's hard to remember that long ago, but back then I don't really think we had much conversation about it. Probably not until I was in 8th grade and getting ready to go into high school did we start talking about it.
Right.
At that time, again, from memory, Seymour High wasn't, just from an academic standpoint, probably not what I was looking for.
Right.
And since I did grow up in Ansonia, there was a thought of me going to Ansonia High School.
And I believe your mother went to Ansonia High,
My mom
correct?
did go to Ansonia High School. Yeah, so we had a connection there. And, you know, I had a lot of friends playing Little League and bitty basketball in Ansonia. So I did think about going to Ansonia High School for a short period of time as well. But my dad went to Derby, and I guess ultimately he thought it would be a good idea for me to go to Derby High School as well. So that's what ended up happening.
Right. Now, when you were a kid, say 9 or 10 years old, football was really big in the Valley, especially Derby, Ansonia, Seymour, Shelton. Let me ask you, did your father take you to a lot of games when you were a kid? I mean, did you go to a lot of Derby games, Seymour games?
We definitely went to some high school football games. I remember going to the Ansonia Derby football game for the first time. I don't remember what year it was, Mike, but I was just like pretty much in awe with the amount of people there. It was just, as a little kid, it just seemed like unimaginable, quite honestly, just the amount of individuals that were interested in watching this football game, you know?
Right.
So that was pretty cool. It certainly made an impression on me.
Right. Now, I think you didn't play football till you were in 8th grade. So, I mean, did you like playing football, like with kids out in the backyard and stuff like that? I mean, did you have a love for it yet?
Yeah, I did. Again, growing up in Ansonia, it's funny. Always in the street, we were playing either football or baseball. Basketball, for whatever reason, was something that, I don't know if it was because we really didn't have any, hoops, but I know there were some neighborhood kids that did have them out in the street. But baseball and football were certainly the sport that we played most out in the street growing up.
Right.
Yeah, and although football, for whatever reason, was the one sport I didn't play formally as a youngster. I didn't play organized football till I was a freshman in high school.
Right. So you didn't even play Pop Warner 8th grade?
I didn't play Pop Warner football at all, no.
Right. So let me ask you this. As far as baseball went, would you say at the time as a kid that was the number one sport that you really loved before you started playing football, or would you say it was a mix?
Well, I definitely enjoyed all the sports, but I would say it was probably baseball because baseball was my father's favorite sport, and it was definitely something that he, I guess for lack of a better word, pushed me towards.
Right.
And so I remember trying out for Little League in Ansonia when I was 9 years old and not knowing a whole heck of a lot about formal baseball and everything, and just playing in the street. And so that was a lot of fun, but that was a long time ago, Mike. It's amazing how quick time goes by. Right,
it really is. And what position would you say as a kid that you played a lot in baseball? Where you played a little shortstop, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, I played shortstop. I think I did make the Little League team as a 9-year-old, and I played in the outfield, but I think when I was 10, 11, and 12, I played shortstop for our team, yes.
Right, and I mean, you probably played a lot of the games at the Nature Center, Nulligan Field, things like that. I mean, Ansonia had a ton of baseball fields around.
Well, I played all the games at the Little League complex right next to Nolan Field there. I'm not sure what it's called anymore.
Right, yeah. So now let me ask you this. 8th grade comes. Do you have a good idea yet where you're going to go to high school, or are you still kind of talking it over with your parents? Because you had mentioned Ansonia was what you were leaning towards when you were like 12, 13 years old. Did you have a good idea in 8th grade where you were going to be as a freshman?
Yeah, ultimately, like I said, we ended up because once you hit 8th grade, obviously, you need to make a decision. So I think that when I talked it over with my mom and dad, and again, my father being from Derby High School, graduate, we just decided ultimately that was probably going to be the best place for me to go to high school.
Right. And, you think about the athletes that would come up when you got to high school. I look at, you had Jim Queen from Shelton, who was a good athlete. You had Jim Pucci, who I think was from Ansonia at the time, who was thinking about going to Derby. You had a good athlete in him, and then yourself. So, and of course, Bobby Orchano. So you had so many good athletes that were getting ready to enter their high school careers. It was a great time for Valley sports. It really was.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I knew Jim Pucci from Little League, although he played on the other side of town.
Right.
So we sort of knew each other just from playing all those years within Ansonia's Little League. And then we both went to Derby High School, and of course he was living in Ansonia at the time and I was living in Oxford, and for whatever reason Jim and I formed an immediate friendship, and we became best friends as freshmen in high school, and to this day we're still best friends. I talk with him probably 5 times a week still.
Right. And he's a great guy. If anybody who doesn't know him, a lot of people do. He's a very great guy. Very generous person, give you the shirt off his back. Great guy.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better than Jim. He is an absolute fantastic individual. Right.
So before we talk about freshman year, did you kind of have a good idea who Lou DiFilippo was by the time you were in junior high? He was a legend at that point. He had long established himself as a great coach. Did you have a good idea who he was?
Well, I certainly was aware of who he was and the coach of Derby High School football. I didn't know a lot about him as an individual and as a coach and what his philosophy was. But he was, again, growing up and going to those games. At that time, being in middle school, he was almost someone of a mythical figure to me as a little kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Freshman year begins, and it's your first time playing organized football. Let me ask you, were you nervous? You don't seem like the type of guy that gets nervous, but you had to be a little petrified that first day of practice.
I got to be honest with you. I was totally nervous. I was totally freaked out. I remember putting my pads on, and again, this is somebody that never played organized football before, and I remember back in the day when we wore those hip pads and girdle and everything, and I was given it, and I got to be honest with you, Mike, I didn't even really know how to put the thing on.
Yeah.
I was sort of looking at it like, what am I supposed to do with this? It was a little embarrassing, quite honestly, because everybody that was playing on the freshman team, they had already played organized football before growing up. So, yeah, I was an outsider, from Oxford, and I never played organized football before. So that was definitely a bit of a learning curve. I remember, quite honestly, there was a time as a freshman, probably not far into the football season, where I actually thought about not playing and leaving the team, and I'm certainly glad that didn't happen.
So you went through some growing pains in the beginning.
Yes, absolutely, no question.
So if I'm not mistaken, I would say your freshman coaches were John DeFrancisco and Frank Zuba. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Right. And they were great. They went on to be very good assistant coaches, during the Charlie DeCenzo era. But just talk about them a little bit. You had to get a kick out of John D when you first met him. He's been the same from the time he started teaching to the time now. So what was your first impression of John D?
I'll tell you, just every time I hear his name, it puts a smile on my face, quite honestly, Mike. Just an absolutely amazing individual who just had a way with making you feel relaxed and comfortable as not only as an athlete, but also as a student as well. When, as a teacher at Derby High School, just really a quality individual that would always put a smile on your face. He really did. And Frank Zuba, he was just another great guy. Certainly, as the years went on, because Frank didn't teach at the high school, I didn't know him quite as well as Mr. DeFrancisco, but both quality individuals. And, they're probably the reason why I ended up continuing to play football, quite honestly, because, they made it, a relatively easy transition once I started learning how things worked.
Right. And, you talk about playing football for the first time. as the season went on, I believe they kind of put you at quarterback. But let me ask you, when you first started out, were you a defensive back, a wide receiver? Where'd they have you when you first started?
When I first started, they had me as a safety.
Right.
And that's what I played the most. I remember on offense, they put me in a little bit at receiver, a little bit at running back.
Right.
And, again, it was difficult for me to start off playing quarterback from game one because I didn't have any organized football experience. So
now, were you taking snaps right from the start, though, in practice? Just like if Jim came out of they'd go with the second team a little bit, would you take snaps?
Yes, I certainly did that. I mean, I was... When I was a freshman, I probably physically looked like a quarterback. I was taller and thin, and I had decent speed, and I had a pretty good arm. So they did put me at quarterback, and I would take snaps with the second team. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Now let me ask you. A lot of people I talk to, who, were good quarterbacks, but they would tell me that the pressure sometimes would get to them, not the pressure of the game, but just like knowing everybody's responsibilities. Did you like quarterbacking, like in practice and stuff and playing in the games, or was it, at times very stressful because you got to know everybody's assignment? You got to make sure, you're handing the ball off to the right gap, throwing to the right person. I mean, was it tough at first?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. I was certainly at a disadvantage, again, only basically playing football in the street with my friends growing up. So again, it almost seemed like a different game when I started playing freshman year of high school football, because you had to know plays, you had to know the terminology, and you had to know what to do. And of course, quarterback is probably the most difficult position in sports because, right, like you said, you have to know pretty much everybody's assignment at all times.
Right. So, for us to talk about the whole freshman season, it would just take too much time. But let me ask you, how'd you think you did your first game that you ever played? I mean, did you enjoy it? Were you nervous? I mean, how was it, that first game that you played as a player?
Well, I remember that Jim, I believe, played the first 4 games.
Right. I'm just talking about you as a player, like your first ever experience.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah. To be honest with you, it was a lot of fun. I mean, again, Mike, it's a long time ago, but I remember I had some pretty good success starting my first freshman football game, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And that was a talented group of guys you had on the team. You had, of course, Bobby Orciano. Tommy D'Onofrio was very good as well.
Tommy was an excellent receiver, no question.
Right, and I mean, that offensive line, they would go on to do great things as you guys got further into your sports career. But let me ask you this. You mentioned that Jim started the first 4 games, then they went to you the last 4 games. And I'm sure you two probably spent a lot of time together helping each other. So there was no jealousy or anything. You two were great friends, and you would do whatever you could to help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Jim was, I mean, going back to freshman year, Jim was, instrumental in helping me understand the game and, how to play the position of quarterback and, basically the thought process involved. And yeah, we were just great friends and always pulling for each other. Absolutely.
Right. So how would you say your first, again, you got to play quarterback the last 4 games. Did you come out of that freshman season saying, I love this game, I'm going to continue to do this?
Yeah, I did. It was definitely a lot of fun. No question about it. Once freshman year was over, I knew that I would play football for all 4 years in high school. Absolutely.
Right. And I'm sure that going to the Derby games at that point, I'm sure you were going every Derby game as well because you know you're going to be on the team next year. That had to be a lot of fun Saturday mornings, especially if you guys had a great win on a Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. Then you get to go watch the varsity. That just had to be a great time to be a kid. Never mind.
It was. It's funny, Mike. I look back at high school, and you compare high school with college and everything, and you think about great times in your life. And I'll tell you, it's pretty tough to beat high school playing sports in the Valley. It really is. It was just an awesome time, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything, quite honestly.
Right. Greg, as good a football player as you were a great basketball player. Talk to me about basketball. Basketball in Derby's tough because Derby doesn't win a lot in basketball. But I believe that when you were a freshman on the freshman team, I believe George Tanner was the varsity coach at the time. And freshman coach, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Jack Walsh? I don't even know.
Yes, it was Mr. Walsh, yes.
Right. So just tell me, another great basketball mind. Tell me what freshman year playing basketball and how much did you learn from Jack Walsh as a coach?
Yeah, he was a really good coach, really a tactician of the game of basketball, and I learned a lot from him. Again, coming in as an outsider, somebody from Oxford, going to Derby High School, there was a learning curve, and of course, coaches are different once you get to high school. It's a little more serious than when you're playing, basketball as a youth. But it was really good. I think we had some success as freshmen.
Right.
We had a fair amount of wins.
I think you also had, correct me if I'm wrong, you had Rich Mester, Cannici with you, and these are guys that, would play with you your senior year, and we'll get into that. But, I mean, you had a good nucleus of athletes and players on that team.
Yeah, we did. Yep, Rick Mester and Ken Chidoba were part of it. And we also had some of the football players playing freshman year of basketball, I believe. But, I think Derby has a way sometimes of being so focused on football that it's difficult for some people to continue to think about other sports because, football has always been the number one sport at Derby High School.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. I'm sure you grew up in Ansonia, then you moved to Oxford and stuff. So I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you were on good basketball teams as a kid. Knowing that Derby doesn't have a great winning tradition in basketball, was it tough at first losing games because you're used to being, successful? And, Derby struggles to get wins. And when you played, they actually had a good run. But let me ask you, was it a little tough sometimes?
Yes, Mike. It definitely was tough. I remember growing up, I played on the Assumption basketball team in Ansonia, and there was just a lot of great players on that team. And quite honestly, we were one of the better teams in the entire state of Connecticut.
Right.
We played in the Catholic School League and had a lot of success there. And then going to Derby High School, and wins were few and far between. At times, it certainly was tough to stay motivated. But basketball was a sport that I just really enjoyed so much that it really didn't matter if we had no wins or 10 wins. I mean, of course, you want to be successful and you want to win, but I really just enjoyed playing that sport throughout high school as well.
Right. So let's talk about baseball as a freshman. I believe Tom Fay was the head coach for the varsity, and I believe John D was his assistant. But did D coach the freshmen that year as well?
Yes. Coach C. Francisco also was the head baseball coach of the freshman team, and I'll tell you, again, it was just...
And he's a very good baseball coach.
Very good baseball coach. He went on to win state titles, I believe.
Yes, two state, yeah.
Yeah, he was an excellent baseball coach. And I'll tell you, whether it be football or baseball, Coach DeFrancisco had a way of motivating kids to perform in the games. He had a way about him that was just very unique. Made you feel comfortable and made you, quite honestly, want to do anything and everything to be successful for him. You know what I mean? Right.
And I believe that Jim, again, played with you, Jim Pucci, and he was a very good baseball player. So, again, you two were playing a lot together. And, talk about baseball season. What did you play as a freshman? What was your primary position?
I was a shortstop.
Right.
I pitched a little bit, but it was mostly playing shortstop as a freshman.
And if people who don't know you, a lot of people in the Valley do, but for people who don't, you were a pretty big threat at the plate. You were a good power hitter. You put the ball over the fence quite a few times, correct?
Yeah, I was definitely more of a home run hitter than a hitter for average, that's for sure. I certainly struck out my share of times as well, too.
Right.
But, I didn't like getting cheated when I was at the plate, that's for sure.
Right. So now let's talk about sophomore year. Now you're with the varsity, and it's Coach Lou DiFilippo. It's Charlie DeCenzo. It's Frank Alou. And, Frank Alou is a tremendous coach, but he could be a little intimidating when you first meet him, and you basically worked with him all the time. So talk about Coach Alou a little bit.
Yeah, Coach Alou, another just fantastic individual, just a great person and a wonderful football coach. But I'll tell you, he was definitely very demanding as the defensive backfield coach for Derby High School. And
he quizzed you a lot, too.
And he would quiz you a lot. And let me tell you something. You better be paying attention because the defensive schemes he put in probably wasn't there probably wasn't too many high schools where you had to think as often as you did playing in the defensive backfield for Derby High School, because there were a lot of defensive schemes that he implemented as coach.
Right. Now let me ask you, were you nervous that year? And you did get varsity time that year as a sophomore. I believe you were playing a lot of safety that year, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I would go in passing situations. And again, it was kind of a big learning curve because, coming in playing freshman football, I was just playing against other freshmen. And then once I was a sophomore, again, it's only my second year of organized football, and I'm playing against, people that are a lot older and a lot bigger and a lot stronger and a lot faster than me. So that was definitely an eye-opener as well. Had to learn to adapt fairly quickly. That's for sure, Mike.
Right. And I know the great thing about those coaches, too, is they may yell at you in practice. They may yell at you in film. During the game, they had a rule. We don't yell at them. It's enough pressure as it is. Let them play the game. And they were good about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was, well, there's nothing that beats Saturday mornings in the Valley playing high school football in the fall. That's for sure. I mean, it was just...
it's something we miss now because you don't see it anymore. It's pretty much Friday nights.
Right, exactly.
Now, let me ask you, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. It's a long time ago. Sophomore year, you guys did win the Housatonic League, correct? Or did you fall a little short? I know there was a 5-5 year somewhere in there.
Yes. No, my sophomore year, we didn't. We won the Housatonic League title my senior year.
Senior year, yes. Talk about, though, Greg, one of the things that you guys were very successful with was beating Shelton. Nowadays, Shelton, they are a powerhouse, and they are very hard to beat. They were a powerhouse back then. They had great coaching. Bob Riggio, I think, started that program your junior year. Talk about just, being able to beat them every Thanksgiving, because that's not easy to do.
No, Mike, that's not easy to do at all. Shelton was, like you said, a very good football team. And, of course, they're also a very large school, so they had a lot more individuals to pull from than Derby did as a Class S school.
Right.
But one of the things, there's a couple of things when I look back at my high school career, and I remember having this conversation with one of my friends. It was probably a few months ago. It was great that we beat Shelton all 3 years that I was on the varsity football team. As a matter of fact, I don't believe Shelton ever scored a point off of us.
Right.
I think they were shut out all 3 years.
Right.
But the other side to that is, unfortunately, I was never on a team those 3 years that beat Ansonia.
Right, and all 3 games were close. I mean, they were nail biters. We'll get into your senior year game. Yeah. That was a great one. But, I mean, that was a time, too, where Ansonia just took off, too, which kind of caught you guys at a bad time.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I mean, that's still probably, I would say probably the biggest regret in high school, not ever having been able to beat Ansonia in football.
Right. So now sophomore year ends. Are you confident going into your junior season that, you're going to get a lot of playing time, obviously, and that you trust your ability now? You could play the game. It's just a matter of putting in the work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At that point in time, I knew that I could definitely. Well, I mean, I got, like you said, I got a fair amount of playing time on the defensive side as a sophomore. So going in as a junior, I had a good idea that I would be a big contributor to the football team.
Right. Now, let's talk a little bit about your basketball season, your sophomore year. I believe it was George Tanner's final season, and that was a good year for Derby, if I'm not mistaken, the 12-8 year. And I believe Rick Mester's brother, Chris, had a phenomenal season. He was a tremendous player. And I also believe that you guys went to Europe that year, correct?
That's right. Boy, Mike, you have a good memory. Yeah, Chris Mester was the star of the team when I was a sophomore. And they were 12-8. They went to the playoffs, I think.
Right.
I think they got knocked out by Warren Harding, I believe.
Yeah, it was a tough game, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was played at Shelton High School. But, I mean, that was probably the most successful team at Derby High School in many, many years.
Did you enjoy playing for Coach Tanner? I know you didn't probably get as much action that year, but, I mean, did you enjoy playing for him? He's a very good coach as well.
Yes, he is. Yeah, I had a great time playing for Coach Tanner, and I believe it was Paul Endoff.
Right, and both demanding, but they also knew how to teach the game and things like that. I'm sure you learned a lot that year as well.
Yeah, there's no question about it. It was interesting when we found out that Coach Tanner wouldn't be returning for my junior year. It was kind of like, wow.
Right, because he was starting to really take that program somewhere. He was doing a great job.
Exactly, yeah. And coming off of the successful season we had when I was a sophomore, it was kind of a surprise. There's no question about it. But Dave Morgan came in and coached my junior and senior year, and it was a lot of fun playing for Coach Morgan. He was a really intense individual. He was
right.
I mean, obviously I was on the court most of the time, but Jim Pucci went to every single game, and I'll tell you, from what I understand, it was awfully interesting watching him coach.
I think he would bite on his shirt a lot, wouldn't he, or his jacket. He was
and
intense.
He had a towel.
Yeah.
Like Jerry Tarkanian did with UNLV. So that was
right. Yeah, he was definitely intense. And then, let's talk a little bit about baseball. You get your first introduction of Coach Fay. Now, you've played for intense guys and Coach DiFilippo, Coach Alu, Coach Tanner, Coach Landolfi. Now you play for a guy who's very laid back. He doesn't, less is more when it comes to him because he doesn't say a lot, but he gets his point across just by, doing what he needs to do.
Yes. Coach Fay was just, again, I just feel so lucky that I played for so many, class individuals when I was at Derby High School. And you're right, he was a very, very quiet man.
Right.
Coming from Coach DeFrancisco as a freshman, then when I was a sophomore playing for Coach Fay, that was, talk about going from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yeah.
It was definitely interesting. There were times when, you sort of wondered, okay, well, he's not saying anything. What's going on here? What is he thinking?
Yeah.
Is he mad? Is he happy? Sometimes
Right.
you couldn't tell, but Coach Fay was just a real good person.
And he knew
a great
pitchers.
coach.
He definitely knew pitchers
Yes,
well.
that was his strong suit. He knew pitchers very well, and he certainly knew the mechanics of pitching. And I think after he saw my mechanics as pitching, he made the wise decision to keep me at shortstop.
Right, and I believe you were getting playing time that year, correct? Sophomore year.
Sophomore year I started at third base. For the high school baseball team. Yeah.
And that team, how was that team? Was that team a decent team that year?
It was a decent team.
Didn't make the tournament, but
no. I don't think we made the tournament any of my 3 years.
Right.
In baseball,
which was tough. You had to win 10 games back then.
That's correct. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right. But we had a decent team when I was a sophomore. Chris Mester played. I think he was in center field, and John Vane played. He was a good baseball player as well. So we had some success, but unfortunately, just not enough to make the state tournament that year.
Right. So now your junior season comes, and you're starting both ways. If I remember, you were starting at receiver and defensive back. That was a little tough year. I believe that was that the 5-5 year, I believe. In
my junior year, we went 5-5-1, I believe.
Right. It was 11 games.
And had a tie that
but
year,
it's funny. Ansonia had a great team that year, and you guys almost pulled off the upset at Ryan Field. I think it was a late game, and you guys just played them so well that day. I mean, that's one thing about Derby. Even when they didn't have the most talent, Derby football kids were tough, and they always stayed in every game.
Yeah, that was, I remember that game, even though it was a long time ago. I remember it very well. That game was played in an absolute downpour.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, the weather probably couldn't have been any worse.
Yeah,
it was a downpour.
That game's online too, so it's a fun. If you ever get the chance, it's a great game to watch. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, I think we ended up losing that game 14-12.
Right.
On a late touchdown. Unfortunately, I remember they had 4th and goal from like the 10-yard line. And Joe Shea threw the ball, and I went for the interception instead of knocking it down.
Right.
And unfortunately, because the ball was so soaking wet, the weight of it sort of took me by surprise, and I wasn't able to grasp it with 2 hands, and it went through my hands. And I believe Gordon Hotchkiss was
another good player for us.
Gordon was a great player. And apparently he had slipped down in the end zone, and the ball fell. Of course, it was behind me, so I didn't see. But from what I was told, the ball basically just went through my hands and fell into his stomach for the for the late touchdown. And that was probably the most difficult loss I had in any sport during my Derby High School career. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. aside from that game, though, you had a very good season that year. I mean, were you satisfied, not record-wise, but were you satisfied how you were performing that year?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think, we went 5-1 that year, but I don't think we...
But you had to beat Shelton to get that 5th win.
That's right. We had to beat Shelton, and I think
preserve that winning season.
That's exactly right. I think that all 5 of our losses were by 7 points or less that year. So we lost a lot of tough games, unfortunately. We really did.
Right.
And then of course, going into senior year, we were really confident going into senior year. We thought we were going to have an exceptional football team. There were a lot of outstanding juniors that played on our team that year, and we did have a great season that year.
Right. Now let me ask you, do you like playing defense or offense better? What did you prefer when you played?
I would probably say offense.
Yeah, you did like offense better.
I liked offense a little bit better. I mean, defense was a lot of fun as well. I mean, I liked playing both sides of the football for sure. I wouldn't have wanted to play just one. But I think if I had to choose between defense and offense, I did enjoy offense a little more. It was more fun, You got to do more things and be more involved in the game as a skilled position player as opposed to on defense. If you were playing a team that didn't throw the ball very often as a safety, the game was a little bit slow at times, because you weren't getting any action.
Right. The one good thing, again, losing to Ansonia isn't fun, but I mean, at least the good thing was you always had a good Thanksgiving. When you had Thanksgiving dinner, it was always a good Thanksgiving.
Yes, it was. Yeah, there's no question.
And Shelton was a rival because Derby was Shelton's rival. They really wanted to beat Derby. They hated Derby. So, I mean, that had to be a good feeling.
Oh, that was a great feeling. Yeah. I mean, again, we were very fortunate to win all 3 Thanksgiving games my sophomore through senior season, and yeah, it's always nice going out on a winning note. There's no question about it.
Right. And so let's talk about basketball a little bit. You started that year as a junior. Now, the team wasn't record-wise a great team, but you guys stayed in a lot of games, and you had some real good games against Shelton, who was a pretty big team back then. I mean, one of the guys from Shelton, when he heard you were coming on the show, he sent me an email, and he remembers you were going out of bounds, and you just threw the ball up in the air, and it went in the hoop. Do you remember that?
Oh, my gosh, Mike, you're putting a smile on my face. I remember that play very vividly. I believe it was right before halftime.
Right.
And I think Ken Shadoba took a long jump shot, and it went off the back of the iron and took a long bounce and was going out of bounds. And I remember just with one hand jumping in the air as I was going out of bounds and just throwing it up at the basket, and the ball went in. Yeah, that was it was a lot of fun. I mean, obviously it was kind of a fluke play, but it's certainly just a lot of fun thinking back on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's things like that you never forget. You might forget how many points you had against, say, Sheehan or somebody, but you'll remember that play forever. I mean,
absolutely. There's no question about it. That was, quite honestly, even though it was in high school, if they ever got video of that back in the day, of course it didn't exist back then, but it probably would have been a Sports Center top 10.
And it's funny you said that, because the guy said to me in the email that if somebody was taping it would be a highlight forever. That's what he said. So you're reading his mind.
That's funny.
You talked about Jim Pucci and the friendship you had with him. You mentioned Ken Shadoba. You had a great friendship with Ken in high school as well. Basketball you two were bonded by, and you two for years kept that friendship going. You two played basketball together in the Derby Men's League and things like that. So you have a great friendship with Ken as well.
Oh, correct? Yeah. It was a lot of fun because, Jim played football and baseball. Basketball was a sport that he didn't play. So, Ken was definitely the person I was closest to on the.
And he was underrated. Good rebounder and a good scorer. He could score,
Absolutely, yeah. Ken certainly wasn't shy when it came to taking a shot. That's for sure.
Right, and Rick Mester, Chris definitely gets a little more press, but Rick wasn't a bad player either. He was a very good player for you guys, and a big reason why you guys made the tournament.
Oh yeah,
your senior
absolutely. Year. There's no question about it. Rick did a lot of the dirty work, quite honestly. I mean, he was a great rebounder and a great passer, and certainly wasn't selfish at all.
Right. And, as far as baseball went that year, again, you guys missed the tournament, but you had a good baseball season that year. I think Jim had a great baseball season. You guys had some good players on that team, and, I mean, even though record-wise it wasn't good, a lot of individuals people stepped up that year and played great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Mike, you're talking about so many things that just, again, make me look back on my career at Derby High School with, just all the stuff that you're mentioning puts a smile on my face because it was just, it was just so much fun. And I'll tell you, playing football, baseball, and basketball in high school, I wouldn't have given that up for the world. Quite honestly, it was just it was an honor and a pleasure, and I really enjoyed going from one sport to the other, depending upon what month it was. You know what I mean?
Now let me ask you before we get into your senior year: do you believe that sometimes kids nowadays are focusing too much on one sport, baseball, and I think it's a reason a lot of pitchers are getting hurt because they're throwing year round? Do you believe that kids should just play different sport, instead of playing baseball, through all year round? Do you think a kid maybe should just try to play another sport and kind of like take that sport off for a season, or not a season, but for, what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. Again, I just thought it was great playing other sports. I think that when you're playing other sports, it helps you in the sport that you're not playing at the time,
right?
Whether it be from just learning a new skill or getting faster or stronger, depending upon what sport that you're playing, getting in better shape.
Right.
Obviously, when you're playing basketball, you're in really good shape, running up and down the court. The practices are very demanding physically. So I think playing other sports can certainly help you develop skills in the sport that's the off season for sure.
Right. So let's talk about senior year. That was a big year for you, and I've always said this. I mean, you made all Valley. You should have made all Housy that year. That was a joke. But you had a tremendous senior year on both sides of the ball. I mean, I could be wrong. You know better than me. I believe you had 6 interceptions, and you had 8 touchdowns on the receiving side.
I think that's right, Mike.
Yeah. So great team. You had a player of the state for the first time in Derby's history in Bobby Orchano, just a tremendous player. Jim was a very good quarterback. And, people forget this too. I mentioned Tommy D'Onofrio. He was not able to play the senior year. He got hurt. So you guys lost him, yet you guys still were able to somehow find a way to win the Housy. Talk about that senior team.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the senior team, it was definitely a great football team, no question about it. I think we lost Tom D'Onofrio in the second game.
Yeah, I think the first game he had 2 touchdowns, had a great game, and then,
no, it's interesting, Mike. I'll tell you, we came off of the 4 preseason games, and we played all big schools.
Right.
I think we played Hamden, Staples, and
maybe Danbury or one of them.
Yeah, it could have been Danbury. I can't remember exactly who the 4th was. And we went 4-0 in the preseason.
Yeah.
And, we had our first game at home at Ryan Field against Amity. And Amity was one of the teams that we knew we would be competing for the Housatonic League title with. And I don't know what happened that day, but our offense couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And we were shut out. We lost that game 7-0.
7.
And
You're right.
And that was a big wake-up call to everybody in the locker room on both sides of the ball because, I don't know what happened. I don't know if we were a little too confident coming off the great preseason that we had as a team. Again, we won those 4 games against very good schools. I think all of them were fairly convincingly, and I don't know. I don't know if we were a little bit too cocky going into that game, and it was a home game for us.
Right.
And we just, you got to give credit to Amity. I mean, they really shut us down. Their defense, I think they sacked Jim. They were all over him the entire game. They probably had 5 or 6 sacks that game, would be my guess. And we never got anything going on the offensive side of the football, and that was very, very disappointing. But that ended up being our only loss in the league, and we ended up going 8-1 and winning the Housatonic League our senior year. So that was certainly a big thrill. It was by far the best football season I had during the 3 years I played varsity football.
Right, and you talk about winning the Housy. You had to win it at Ryan Field, your home, which had to be great. And you had to play Shelton. I believe you beat them 18-0.
I think that's right. Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I think you had a touchdown in that game. I could be wrong.
No, you're right.
Right.
Did, yep.
Yeah. So you go out. Again, you brought up Ansonia, and that year against Ansonia was a classic game. Bobby Orchano ran like a maniac that game, and
he did.
It went back and forth. Tremendous game. It was like a basketball score, but you go out and you beat Shelton. You win your final home game ever that you're going to play on that field, and you win the Housy, so you bring home a championship. How great of a feeling was that?
I'll tell you, it was an absolutely unbelievable feeling, Mike, because it was the first league title I had ever experienced as an athlete at Derby High School.
Right.
So, again, coming off, a tough loss the first game of the year, and then being able to win out the rest of our league games that season was just, I think that it's a testament to the coaching staff and the individuals that were playing, because it's just I just think back and just how happy everybody was in the locker room afterward. And it was difficult for, we didn't have a lot of seniors playing football. It was, I think we only had 8 individuals that ended up staying with the program as seniors my year. But for most of them, they knew that was the last organized football game they were ever going to play. So, you look back, there's a lot of, happiness and everything, but you also, you're reflecting, because, it's just kind of strange that, people know that they're not going to continue to play in college.
Right. And, you talked about the coaches, they could be demanding, Coach Lou, Coach Alu, but one thing I know about them is when it's all said and done and it's all over, they come up to you like fathers, and they're bawling just as much as you guys are. And I know Coach Alu was probably crying at the end of that game.
Yeah, I would say Coach Alu was probably the most emotional of the bunch.
Yeah,
for sure. There's no question about it. But it was just such a great feeling of joy and accomplishment, and just knowing that we came together as a team and worked hard as coaching staff and players.
And that's always the goal, to win the Housy.
That's always the goal.
So you did have a successful senior season.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't ever look back and say we didn't do what we were supposed to.
No, absolutely not. It was a fantastic season. We were an outstanding football team, and our record and league titles certainly reflected that.
Right. Now, let me ask you, you would go on to play at college, but, were you sad that it was over as far as Derby went? You had to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, playing football at Derby High School back in the early 80s was just an honor and a privilege. And I knew that even going to play in college, that I was not going to be playing in front of more people than I did for the Ansonia and Shelton football games,
Right. So now senior year of basketball, I believe you guys are 7-12. You got to win the last game of the year to get in the tournament. And again, you had a monster game, and I think you capped it off with a dunk to kind of put the exclamation point, and you kind of went like this when you knew the game was over. You put your finger up in the air, number one. How great was that?
Oh, I'll tell you. Mike, I was waiting to dunk in a basketball game ever since my junior year, and I never got the chance.
Right.
So, the season was going fairly quickly. And then finally I was able to get a fast break and do it in a game, which was a big thrill for me, because it was something that I wanted to do for the past 2 seasons. You know what I mean? But yeah, we actually had to win our last
4 games. You guys
were
4-12.
We were 4-12.
Yeah.
And we had to win out and win our last 4 games against some.
I think North Haven was in there.
Yeah, North Haven was in there. Yeah. Another,
maybe Lyman Hall.
School. I think North Haven, Lyman Hall.
Sheehan, right? Or was it maybe who was the other team? I'm trying.
Mike,
maybe Brantford. Yeah, but it was.
I honestly can't remember the other 2 teams, but I just know that nobody expected us to win the last 4 games and make the state tournament. I can tell you that much. And so that was a really big thrill, being able to play in the state tournament game at Hampton High School against Middletown. My final year of basketball at Derby High School. Yeah.
Right, and if you look at it again, football, you want to win the Housy because that's what's expected. Basketball, you're not expected to win, never mind win a championship. So making the tournament, that was your championship.
That was absolutely our goal, making the state tournament. We knew we had absolutely no shot of winning the Housatonic League title in basketball.
Right.
That just wasn't going to happen.
But to get 8 wins is not easy in basketball.
No, to get 8 wins was not easy at all.
I look at Glenn Gruttadoria. He was a big player for you guys that year. Mester,
yes,
Chidoba, yourself. And it was all the spare parts that really helped to make that a great season.
Yes, absolutely. Ron Bartone played as well. He was a big contributor. That definitely wasn't easy, winning the last 4 games, but it was a lot of fun. Again, I look back at that as certainly the high point of my basketball career, making the state tournament as a senior at Derby High School, because as you know, Mike, Derby High School very infrequently makes the state tournament in basketball.
Right. And, Greg, you would go on to college and have a successful career in college at Central. And one of your former teammates, I saw him last night, and he said to me, he goes, let me tell you, I've been around Derby a long time. As far as an athlete goes, he's one of the best I've seen. He said that especially with basketball, and that's Ronnie Leno. And Ronnie Leno was telling me stories, how, when he would play with you in basketball, you were so intense. When the game's going on, you don't want to talk to him, but when the game's over, you're like the happiest guy. And he just said you were one of his favorite teammates, and he wanted you to know that. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
I'll tell you, I certainly appreciate that, Mike. Ron Leno is an absolute great guy, and I'll tell you, I just remember playing a lot of sports with him back in high school, and he was just a class individual, and when we played together at Central Connecticut as well for football, and
you played for Buddy Amendola.
Amendola.
How was that? How was playing for Buddy? That he was a Derby guy, so you had the Derby connection.
We did have the Derby connection, of course. Buddy Amendola came over from Yale University, excuse me, to coach at Central, and it was interesting. I mean, Buddy Amendola, he was an intense guy, but he was more on the quiet side, especially as far as a football coach is concerned. He was never the type of individual to really get up in front of somebody and start yelling and screaming and everything. He was more on the calm and quiet side, but he certainly had a way of getting his point across as well too. There's no question about it. So yeah, I look back at playing football at Central too. That was a lot of fun, and again, something that I'm glad that I did. I wouldn't give that up either.
Right. Now, what did you play at Central? Was it more
I was a receiver.
Right. So you were kind of in a position that you were comfortable with. You had played it in high school. So it had to just be a great time, too, in college.
Oh, play. Absolutely, yeah. Even though you're playing Division II football, there's still a lot of very skilled people that you're playing with and playing against.
Right.
No doubt about it. So, it was something, again, that I really enjoyed my time at Central Connecticut a lot, for sure.
Right. And, it's impressive to, we'll just get back to your high school career for a minute. The fact that you never got to play Pop Warner, you didn't play till freshman year, and yet you pretty much were playing 3 straight years on the varsity. I mean, sometimes you may not play till you're a senior. There's so many good athletes in Derby and players that it's hard to find a field till you're like a senior. So the fact that you got a lot of playing time, I mean, you had to really feel good about that even though you didn't get to play Pop Warner, you had the tools and the ability to be out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, looking back on it, I'm very thankful that I was able to play for 3 years on the varsity at Derby High School. Like you said, a lot of times people don't get to play until they're seniors, and
right.
Yeah, I definitely, it certainly makes me feel proud that I was able to do that. Yeah.
Right. And, one thing I noticed over the years is you always made it a point to get back to a Derby game. You couldn't go to all of them. Your job didn't always, allow it. But you were always able to go to Derby Ansonia. And I believe one of the highlights for you is you got to see Lou DiFilippo's the field be named after him in his honor, and you were there that day when that happened.
Yes, certainly very well deserving. I mean, Coach DiFilippo was just an amazing individual and an incredibly successful football coach, and just a very honorable individual. And everybody that played for him, and I think that really played against him and coached against him, had nothing but incredible respect for Coach DiFilippo.
Right. The other thing too, Greg, after your high school and college career ended, you still kept in touch with Derby, and you still played Derby sports. You played for PYMC in softball. I think you played for Kasdan Fuel in basketball. So you had a bad knee playing basketball, and so Derby never really left you. You continued to be involved with Derby, and those PYMC teams, those were some great teams. You guys were playing sometimes 4 games a week.
Yeah. I mean, playing softball. I guess once you're out of school and you realize that your competitive playing career is over, it's still nice when you have that competitive spirit to be able to still play organized basketball and softball. Obviously, it's not at the level of when you're playing, in high school and college, but it still was a lot of fun, and
Right.
it sort of, helped feed that urge that you had as an individual, and again, and just the camaraderie as teammates and just having fun and, being a little bit successful. I mean, that's just all part of sports,
Right, and you still keep in touch with a lot of these guys. I think you and Chidoba still keep in touch. Obviously, you and Pucci talk all the time, you and Jim Pucci.
Yes.
And, I mean, one of the things I always remember, too, is your father would always have an annual outing every year, and Jim and you would always be there. And, I mean, you two were like the best of friends. And that's something, if you got nothing else out of Derby, you got that. You got a great friend that you met, and you guys had a great friendship.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite honestly, of all the athletic success and team success that I had at Derby High School, that's probably the best thing that came out of me playing there was the the friendship that I've had and continue to have with Jim as my best friend. Absolutely.
Right. And that whole class kind of roots for each other. I look at a guy like Joe Mazzanti, who speaks very highly of you and Jim. Now, he didn't play football. He was a cross-country and track runner. But yet, everybody kind of pulled for everybody in the other sports. There was no jealousy. That class really was a very, special class.
Yeah.
They were a close class.
Yeah, we definitely were. I don't know if you know this or not, but you mentioned Joe Mazzanti, and Joe's just a wonderful individual. He was the team statistician
For basketball,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he hung around with the basketball team all the time. And I'll tell you, Joe really, I mean, he was a hard worker. He took it very serious, and he did a fantastic job. And
Right.
We loved having him as part of the program.
Right. And, I mean, that's what it was. I mean, a bond between all you guys. When you look back, Greg, I mean, you say so much puts a smile on your face, your time, it was carefree back then. What is the thing you're most proudest about in your Derby sports career, if you had to pick one?
I think if I had to pick one, it would unquestionably be winning the Housatonic League title as a senior in football.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing that I'm most proud of, absolutely.
Right. And now let me ask you this, Will. When you're able to retire someday, will Greg Shpak ever get involved in coaching in anything, baseball, whatever it might be, or try to do that? Because, I mean, you look like you would definitely be a good coach in any of the sports.
It's something that I've thought about, but being a coach in any sport requires a great deal of commitment.
Right.
And a great deal of time. And, these people work incredibly hard. And
it almost becomes a full-time job.
It almost becomes a full-time job. And unfortunately, I've never been in a position where I've had that amount of time to give. So it's nothing that I've really thought about seriously over the past 25 years.
Right.
But and that's probably the biggest reason why, is because it just requires an incredible amount of dedication and commitment on part of the individuals that coach.
Right. Now let me ask you this. If the spread offenses were around when you played, how many touchdowns would you have and how many touchdown passes would Jim have? Do you think you would probably have 3 or 4 a game? These spreads are unbelievable.
Well, I don't know if I would have 3 or 4 a game, but certainly more than we had. There's no question about that. But I guess the game has changed.
Yeah,
Mike?
It's changed a lot. I mean, Derby, it's every school. They wear the red, the blue pants now. The white pants aren't really around anymore, so it's a different time. So much has kind of changed. I mean, I don't know if you've been to a game in a while, but you'd be shocked a little bit.
Oh, I can imagine. It's, I guess, like you said, it's just a different time. I mean, it's 2017, and 1982 is a long, long time ago, Mike. And, we've got a 35-year reunion, and quite honestly, it's really hard to imagine that amount of years
goes by quick. I mean, it definitely.
Really,
I'm sure you could remember things like yesterday.
Absolutely.
But before we go, Greg, just if kids are listening to this interview today and they see that you were a 3-sport player and you had to put all the time in, the dedication, and look what you're doing today in your life, you're doing great things. What would be the message you would say to today's kids who are athletes?
I would say, listen, you only get a chance to be in high school once. I think that if you don't play a sport or 2 or 3 sports, you're probably ultimately going to look back on your high school career with possibly some disappointment because, like I said, you're only in high school once, and I would certainly encourage anybody to play at least one sport. And if you're able to play 2 or 3, then I would say absolutely go for it, no question.
Right. Well, Greg, it's been an honor and a privilege. I've been a longtime fan of yours, great athlete at Derby, and I really thank you for coming on today. I really do appreciate it. And for what you did for all 3 sports and to be so good at all 3, I mean, that's a tribute to the dedication and the commitment you had, and I really do applaud you and congratulate you for that. So thank you again for coming on today.
Thanks so much, Mike. It was really great seeing you, and thanks for bringing up so many good memories as well.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. And that was Greg Shpak for Valley Sports Rewind. I'm Mike Cannici saying goodbye, everyone.